Towards the end of the COVID-19 lockdown, the government lifted its restrictions. This allowed people to start making appointments at the clinic again. This was great news for hotels. Business was at an all-time low, and we needed the revenue. The front desk called me one shift and said a guest's remote isn't working for his TV. I went to his room and knocked on the door. A man in his mid to late 40s answered the door. He was wearing a hospital mask with a face shield and a pair of blue gloves. I stood in the doorway making sure he wanted me to enter the room. He held up the remote with a pair of tongs he brought from home. "It's broken," he said in a monotone voice. I asked if I could come in and make sure it was the remote and not the TV. He nodded and stepped aside so I could enter the room. I grabbed the remote from the tongs and walked over to the TV. I heard the man shut the door and lock it behind me. I turned around to see what he was doing as he swung the night latch over, locking it behind me. I thought I would be in and out really quick, so I didn't need to mention the open door policy to him. I pressed the power button on the remote and found it was wet and sticky with something. The light didn't come on the remote on any button I pushed. I asked if he sprayed something on it. He said he Googled the dirtiest things in a hotel room and the TV remote was number one. So he sprayed it with disinfectant. I said, "Well, I have some brand new remotes downstairs, I'll get you one and be right back." He asked if I could just bring the remote still in its bag so he could open it. I said sure as I walked over to the door and took off all of the locks. Before I opened the door, the man asked when the room filters had been changed last. I answered, "In this room last week." "How could you know that?" he asked. I replied, "Because I did it a week ago, sir." He nodded, then asked if I felt the room was cleaned properly. I looked around the room and said, "Yeah, as far as I can tell it has been." I then asked him why he was wondering that. Then maybe he found something wrong in the room. He slowly looked around the room, then back at me. "You're the fourth person I've seen in 14 months. I sighed in relief. I said, "Wow, that long?" He nodded and said, "I live alone, in the country, in Michigan. My job laid me off and I've been ordering food through the app. They drop the food off once a month on the front steps of my house. I rarely see anyone. My clinic appointment got rescheduled after it was canceled during the shutdown. So I drove here from Michigan. I saw one person at the gas station, then the front desk clerk, a woman in the elevator, then you, the maintenance man." He finally looked me in the eye and stared at me. I replied, "Wow, that's crazy. How long are you here for?" "One night," he replied. I said, "Well, the clinic will have a ton of people around it, so be careful." From what I could tell, he looked shocked and slowly sat down in a chair. "How many people are there?" he asked. I said, "I don't know, less than it used to be, that's for sure." "Were there any layoffs here?" "Yes, sir, I was laid off for a few weeks." "Is it hard to hire people because of the virus?" "Yes, sir, a lot of people don't want to work right now, so we're all doing extra jobs." I was starting to get a little nervous about him, so I left the room to get him a new remote. I brought it up to him still in its bag. I said, "Here you go, sir," as I handed the remote to him. "Take care," he said to me as he slowly closed the door. I honestly felt bad for him. You never think about the people that live alone. I hope he's doing better and has someone to spend time with.
That poor guy watching the news for 14 months, then driving to the doctor.
Those squiggly lines are supposed to be the virus. Subscribe.